Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's doing good today. Okay, so today we are going to be covering SLAs and entitlements. It's a continuation in our customer service series we've been doing here for the past couple months. So thanks everybody for showing up today. So again, my name is Mitch Milam. I'm a dynamic CRM architect. You can get me at my email at Mitch@XRMCoaches, on Twitter or on LinkedIn. So please connect whenever you have time and interest. And if you have any questions following this up, then please let me know. So a little bit about webinar housekeeping today. So everybody's muted, but if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand or just enter the question in the question box, and we'll get to those. I'll try to keep an eye out for those as we go along through here. Otherwise, I'll stop every now and then and see if anybody has any questions. And then, of course, we'll have Q&A at the end as well. So training resources for the stuff. So I try to put all of my webinars up on my webinar page on xrmcoaches.com. I'm not always as fast as I could be. I should put it up there. If you go to youtube.com/xrmcoaches, that's my YouTube channel. So this webinar and all the other webinars are recorded and put up there as soon as I get through processing. So later today, this will be up. Knowledge Bits is my email delivery system for some tips and tricks on different topics. And then I've got a bunch of free stuff out at the free stuff link. So I've got learning plans and different other things I'm enhancing as we go along as well. So today we are going to be discussing service level agreements and entitlements. So before we get started, let me see a show of hands. How many people have actually used either SLAs or entitlements in their own organization or as a consultant for a customer? I'd love to hear that. Okay, so just a handful of you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of new to me, quite honestly. I don't really have anyone who uses uses the customer service module in I guess what I would call a high profile environment where you would need an SLA or an entitlement. That's just not the kind of company I've been working with. So anyway, so it's always good to get other people's perspectives. So SLAs and entitlements are both configured from within the settings area of Dynamics 365 under service management. You'll find them under service terms. So we have service level agreements and entitlements. They are totally distinctive, but they can be used together. So we'll be kind of talking about that here in a second. So let's go through SLAs first. So what is a service level agreement? Well, it is an agreement or contract between a service provider and its customers. So a lot of places have service level agreements with their suppliers. So for instance, phone systems, if the phone is down for more than an hour, then they get a discount and stuff like that. So it really kind of depends on the type of operation that you have and what type of suppliers that you have. So for instance, a lot of the larger hardware companies have SLAs to where if you have a hardware failure, they will have someone out within 4 to 8 hours. So that's a typical SLA that you might find within a company. Others are that someone will contact you within 2 hours and have your issue assigned to somebody and actively being worked within 4. That would be another example of an SLA. So where can we find SLAs? So starting with the spring release of 2016 and continuing on into the fall release of Dynamics 365, we can now put SLAs on activities with the exception of recurring appointments on the standard big box entities we have, so account, contact, order, invoice, quote, opportunity, and lead, and also custom activities and entities as well. The default usage for most SLAs is on the case entity. So that's where they first shipped, and that's where you kind of probably get the most usage out of them, although we're going to kind of explore a couple of scenarios that may or may not be real. So when we get there, we can discuss to see if it's actually stuff that would actually happen in real life. So when you have an SLA, this is how it shows up. So you select the SLA, and depending on how you've configured it, you can have a timer. And as you see at the bottom of the image here, this SLA expires in 2 days, 23 hours, 57 minutes, and 29 seconds. So what I did on this SLA is I want somebody to turn this new account into a prospect within 3 days. So that somebody being somebody on our side. Okay, so we create a new account somehow. I want a salesperson to either turn them into a prospect or get rid of them within 3 days. It may be kind of realistic, but that's kind of how things work sometimes. So this is an example of how you would do that. And this was, as you can see, put it on the account entity. So one word of warning here, there's lots of moving parts to these things, and some of them you have to configure before others, but some of them you can't configure until you after you configure others. So there's a lot of chicken versus egg. The whole thing is like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, a lot of this is you go configure things in one place, you go back to another place to configure some other stuff, then you may have to go back to the first place to finish configuring things. So if you see some of the screenshots and stuff that I have, if it looks like we're bouncing back and forth, it's because we are. So it's just the way it kind of works out, and I'll try to make note of that as we go through this. Okay, so let's pretend that we're going to add an SLA to an entity from scratch. So there's a multi-step process to this. The first step is we actually have to enable SLAs. So here we have the account, and there is a checkbox underneath communication and collaboration says enable for SLA. So what you do is you click the checkbox, you press the save button, and then press the publish button so it's published. And then the next step is to actually go to an entity called SLA KPI instance. Now this is kind of odd. I tried this to do it from the account and it didn't work correctly. So I don't know why, but this is the instructions that I found elsewhere, and this is what I'm going to show you. So what you do is you go to the SLA KPI instance within the customizations, go to one-to-many relationships and create a new one-to-many relationship. We're going to go from the SLA KPI instance to whatever entity we're working with, in this case the account. We can specify the display name, the actual schema name for both of these, how you want it to display, the standard stuff that you would normally use. So this is step 2. Then what we need to do is we need to go into the forms for the SLA KPI instance, and we need to create a new quick view form. And what this is actually going to be displaying our counter and whatever else we want to. So we're going to add a timer control, and the label is going to be SLA expires in, and then we have some features that we want to actually pay attention to here. So the failure time field is failure time, and then we have different conditions based on different things we want. So in this case, we're looking for a status. So the SLA is going to be tied to a specific type of data, and it really kind of depends how you configure it. But we're going to look at the status field. We're going to look for succeeded, for success, for failure, non-compliant, for warning, a nearing or non-compliant, a cancel is canceled, then pause is pause. So these kind of go together. Then what we do, and this is the thing is kind of funky, we go back to our account, open the form, the account form, and the first thing we have to do is actually embed the lookup that was created when we created the one-to-many relationship on the SLA KPI instance. So remember, we called it SLA. You can go back to this one. As you see, account SLA is what the lookup field's called. So that was what was actually placed on the account entity when we created this relationship. So we're going to add that to the form. And then what we're going to do, we're going to embed a quick view form. So go to Insert, Quick View, and then you give it a name and a label, and you can display that or not. And we go and the first thing we have to do is specify the lookup field that points to the SLA. And again, this time it's account SLA, which is what we just added to the form in the previous step right here. The related entity is of course SLA KPI instance, and then the quick view form that we created earlier, which I called account SLA KPI, is what we select here. And so that's what it's going to look like. And again, the quick view form is going to guide everything of how everything is displayed within the account for this SLA. So you do that, save the form, and publish, and everything is ready to go. Now, we have to go define what we're actually SLAing. So the first thing we need to do is go to our system settings. So it'll be settings, administration, system settings, and we have to basically set up our configuration. Now, the reason I did not show you this first is the drop down that you see there for the entity name will be populated with any entity whose enable SLA checkbox has been checked. If we did this first, and we would be missing the account because we just turned that on. So that's why I'm doing it here. You can, like I said, the default is case, so that's fine. We could do this as well. But what you would do is you could go and enable SLAs for all the entities you want and do all the relationships and the form stuff, and then you come here and you can go and pick stuff. So the main thing, the main block of this is, let's go to the top, sorry. So automatically apply SLA on a record update after the SLA was manually applied. So what this means is I want to reapply the SLA after somebody actually started it manually. So yes or no, the default is no. Then I'm going to select the pause status. So you have the ability to pause an SLA. So what would happen with that is, remember, it's a timer. It's counting down from whatever kind of time frame you specified. So there are situations where you're waiting for a customer's response. Well, that's not your fault. That's their fault. Therefore, you don't want to penalize either your company or your individual contributors by the customer not getting back. So a lot of times what will happen is they will actually pause the SLA until such a time as the customer gets back to them, and then they will restart the SLA and continue on. That is, again, an option that you turn on or off, depending on if your organization allows it or not. Some places it doesn't matter. The way that Microsoft works is they have a severity A, B, C, and D, and if you call in with a Sev A, they work at 24 hours a day as long as you work at 24 hours a day. If you want to go home and take a nap, it is no longer a Sev A to you, therefore it is no longer a Sev A to them, and they will drop it back to a Sev B, and you can take it up in the morning when you get up. Okay, that's an instance of that. So in that case, dropping it up to Sev B would be like the SLA being put on hold. So what you're saying here is, I would like these values that I have on the left-hand side to be available to be paused. So you can move those over to the right-hand side if you want. The last thing here is, do we want to automatically apply an entitlement if it exists for the customer? So we have two conditions here: when the record is created, or a case is created, or a case is updated. So the default is yes. So what this means is I'm going to automatically apply a default entitlement to a case if we have an entitlement for that customer defined. We'll get into entitlements after we get to the SLAs here. So creating an SLA is actually about a three-step process here. The first is you actually pick the entity itself. And again, this is just a list of the entities that you've turned on or enabled for SLA. You give it a name. And then when you click OK, it opens a standard CRM record that has information that you can select. So again, you have the name, you have the account. The applicable from is the date, and I'll show you later. We have different things we can select for when it's from, when it's modified, etc. We have a set of business hours that we can select if we want to say that the SLA is only applicable during normal business hours. Say we have a customer support department that works from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So therefore, the SLA is only valid within those time frames. And you set that up with the service calendar. I don't have one selected because I don't have one set up in this case. SLA type is enhanced, which is a default. And again, I covered it on the last screen. Allow, pause, and resume is if we allow the SLA to be stopped and restarted. Otherwise, it will just keep running until it times out or produces a failure. The next thing that we have to do is actually define what makes up the SLA. So the SLA is just kind of an overall container that has information about what you're connecting to. The SLA items are what you're actually monitoring. So it has a name, and then you pick a KPI that goes with it. And then you have a search criteria that you specify so that you can say, okay, this is when this actually applies. And if you don't leave it to, if you don't put a value in it, I left it blank as you see here, what this means is I'm applied to all records. Otherwise, we could put in a filter criteria that would allow us to define it for certain types of records. And then it would only be applied to those types. So the success criteria that we're going to use to judge if the SLA has been successfully completed is we're going to reference the relationship type to see if the relationship type has been set to prospect. If we don't, as I mentioned earlier, if we do not set the a relationship type of prospect within 3 days, then we failed. And this would be what you would call an internal SLA. So it's only internal facing. So this is one of the things that you could goal your individual contributors on. So for support, or this would be a salesperson thing, if they don't turn a lead into a prospect in 3 days, then they don't get credit for it. Okay, and it could actually count against them in their scoring. We have a warning that will go off after 1 day. We will be in a warning stance. So in 1 day, if we haven't converted them, then we're basically going to flip into a warning. So I'll just change the color of the SLA. The last step after you define the items is actually activate it. So it's a process that works behind the scenes, and any of the background processes that Dynamics 365 uses has to be activated. So we activate it, and then the final step, if you wish, you don't have to. If you only have one SLA per entity type, you can set as default, and it will automatically be applied every time that you create that type of record. Or if you have an SLA type that's distributed or used more than the other types, you could also do this. This just saves a manual step for the user to actually have to select the SLA. So what happens is when you create the record and you hit save, if you have a default, it will automatically be applied to that record as it's saving it. Okay. So here is another view of the SLAs in action. So this comes from the case. So these are already built into the system. And what we're doing here is we have part of this is built in, part of it that I created myself, but we have 2 timers. One is we're looking at the first response, and 2, we're looking at the resolve. Okay, so how long did it take us to actually respond to the case? So that's a KPI that we track. And again, I mentioned this earlier, maybe we have in this case, we have 60 minutes to respond to a case once it's created. So that means if we get an email that comes in, we've got automatic case creation turned on, it creates a case automatically, routes it to the appropriate queue, somebody picks it up to work on it. They have 60 minutes to actually pick the case up and actually respond to it. When they respond to it, it actually will check a box and fire off this KPI as complete. The next thing is we have 24 hours to resolve this case. So that counter is counting down as well. So the second KPI, resolved by KPI, is actually watching the closure of the case with a resolve status. Okay. So any questions on SLAs? Any comments? Any pointers that people can point us to? Lisa has something. Okay, Lisa. I'll try to mute you. I don't think I can mute you, Lisa. Jamie says, can you trigger via workflow? Jamie, that's a good question. I think the answer is yes. There are some things that you can do that I have seen some other articles talking about. I haven't done it myself, but the basic answer should be yes. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so let's go talk about entitlements. So entitlements are very similar to the contracts that existed in other versions of Dynamics CRM from, heck, I don't even know how far back they go. They go far back as I do, which is 3.0. I mean, Larry can probably talk they were in 1 or 1.2. But they go back to, and they're replacements of contracts because contracts were extremely specific and they were horribly inflexible. How many people had fun with contracts? Show hands. How many people never use contracts? Well, no. Okay, maybe you missed stuff. No, a few of you. Okay. Yeah, I've only had, believe it or not, in all my years, literally since 2005, I literally have one customer who uses contracts. And I had another customer who was going to want a contract thing. I asked around, and my friend Joel Lindstrom said, just create your own. And so I gave the customer a choice. I went and configured up some dummy data. I said, okay, take a look at this, do some stuff like you would normally do, and let me know whether it works. And it's like, yeah, no. The thing with contracts, when you activate them, they're set in stone, cannot be changed. And that's really not how the real world works. So we end up creating our own contract entity, and it works fine. No restrictions, and we can do pretty much anything we want. So as I mentioned earlier, like SLAs, entitlements are processes, so they have to be activated so that the system knows to watch them behind the scenes. And then entitlements are actually defined at the record level. So when you create an entitlement, it's actually for a specific thing, specific account, specific contact, etc. Okay. And there's a default entitlement that can be used to automatically assign things when a new case is created would be another thing we can do. And we'll get into this when we do the demo and stuff. So here's what an entitlement looks like. So we have a name, we have the record. In this case, it's a case because really we're tying to people and companies here. We have a start and end date. So this is the date range that we have for our particular entitlement. So in this case, we're doing the entire calendar year of 2017. We can restrict the case creation based on entitlement terms. That's a yes or no, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Owner, is it the default? And then allocation type. We can decrease cases remaining. And finally, we have the entitlement channels. We'll get to these in just a second here. So primary customer, again, is just going to be the customer itself. The interesting one here is the restrict based on entitlement terms. So what this means is if the customer bypasses or exceeds the counters or terms, as they call them, it will prevent the user from creating a new case. So in other words, if I go back to the top here, if we have total terms, so let's say we have a Datum Corporation is allowed to create 250 cases within their contract, for lack of a better term. When they get to 251, they're going to get an error message. If we have this turned on to yes, we don't no right now. So what would happen is we're bypassing that and they're going to keep going. So that means that the account manager, technical account manager, has to go and say, hey, by the way, you just exceeded, or what they should have done is they get the 225 or maybe even 200. You have a call with them. It's like, you're on your way. It's June. You've gone through 200 issues. You've got 50 left. You got 6 more months. You're probably going to have to buy some. So let's be prepared or go ahead and do that. Again, you can tie it to an SLA if you wish. You don't have to. And you can also have this entitlement to be automatically applied to the record whenever it's created. Okay, so any cases that are created for a Datum Corporation will automatically have this entitlement applied to it without any user intervention at all. So again, the terms, number of cases or number of hours, because some places do a flat rate for a case, some places only work on hours. We can decrease the remaining number of terms by either the case creation or the case resolution. This is kind of an accounting issue. So a lot of places don't decrement your counter until you actually close the case. But some places, if they have a lot of cases simultaneously, so I mentioned like we have 250. You think about it, if you have 50 people that are capable of calling you and opening a case, and they did, and you're at 200, next thing you know, you're at 250, and you're only on a resolution, what would happen is you're going to start getting issues because you've bypassed or you've exceeded your term limits. So what you would do is on case creation, it's like, hey, you've already created 250 cases. You can't create another one. So again, you kind of really have to kind of play with it within your customer and within your organization of how you want to do it. And again, the total terms is how many do you start with, or what are the top, and then how many do we have left. So what will happen is the remaining terms will be decremented based on the decrease remaining on field. So it'll either be decremented when the case is closed or when the case is created, depending on that field. The channel is actually a secondary term limiter. And there's a field, there is a global option set called case origin. And this is used on the case, and it's also used here, as you can see. And it has the different channels or methods of opening a case. Normal being phone, email, and web. Facebook and Twitter for those that have a social engagement tied in of some type. And what this allows you to do is actually specify they can create only so many web calls or phone calls or emails to open cases. And when you exceed those terms, it will actually not let you create a case based on that channel, which is very, very fascinating. You can restrict it by products and by contacts. So what this means when you activate these features, like in this case, Patrick Sands is the only one from the Alpine Ski House who can open a case. If anybody else tries to open a case, it will give them an error. Okay, so that's a way to keep people from who are not supposed to be opening cases. That happened to me when I worked at Microsoft as a technical account manager. One of my customers gave their support ID to another guy because he was in a fit of bother, as they say, and they ended up opening 5 support cases when they were only supposed to open 1. And they were like, well, can we get our case numbers back? I'm like, no, we worked on them. So, and what it was, they didn't know he was opening multiple cases. They only gave him permission to open 1, but he's like, hey, well, I got the Microsoft number. I'm just going to use it. So he did. And then come to find out he was in the UK and we weren't supporting the UK at that point in time. So this is the error that the user gets whenever they try to open a case that is restricted by contact or product. So this thing here. So again, you get the error message there based on one of these two things. If you totally run out of things, of terms, then you get this error message. So basically, it's not the best thing in the world, but all it means is you can't open a case because the entitlement that you've specified how you're working with this customer has been exceeded. Okay? So any questions at all about what we covered so far? I know it's kind of quick and dirty. Oh, Sanford has to run to another meeting, everybody. Everybody say goodbye to Sanford. Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, let's go look at some stuff here. So if we dive into SLAs, Larry says terms used to be minutes. That's kind of interesting, Larry. I find terms to be a very odd way of counting. I would have come up with a different phrase myself. Peter asks, are existing cases taken into account when the new entitlement is created? That's a good question. Hang on a second and when we get into it, there's a couple things I want to bring up. So let's go through the SLA, then we'll go look at cases here. So this one is what I configured. Now, this is partially configured by the system. The SLAs weren't configured. Just the form and all the stuff that goes with it is ready to go. They just didn't give you any default data as they want to do sometimes. Okay, so we have a name. Let me deactivate this real quick. Remember, a process that's activated cannot be edited. Okay, so we have an entity here, which is either going to be case or account of this type. It's applicable from, so this has been saved, so we can't edit it, so I'll have to open a new one up. Let me just go do that real quick, then I'll come back to this one. Okay, created on, modified on, followed by record created on, resolved by, first response by, escalated on, last hold time. Now, the first question is, what the heck is the difference between created on and record created on? I don't know. I think what this is Dynamics 365 and CRM have this ability to create, to specify a different created on date. It's called an override when you're doing data imports. So you can specify this, the created on date program or in this one field, and it will actually replace the created on date that's done automatically. I think that's what the difference is. But these are the types of things that are specific to the case entity that they've used to actually allow you to fill out when things are done. So these are real fields within the entity itself. Okay, so basically you've got is it resolved by? So basically what you have is dates, and these are all dates and times. So if it followed up, did we resolve it? What was our first response? Was it escalated? And what was the last on hold time? Again, we can specify the business hours if we want. And then if we want to actually allow pause and resume. So these are all fine. I'm going to leave that as it is, and I'll save this. And once we save it, we can go create the case details as I was showing you earlier. So let me go back over to the other one. Actually, you know what? That's not going to work. Let me go back to where I was. Sorry, I forgot. This is kind of interesting. This interface is kind of unique. There are certain things, as you see, there's a lot of lockdown fields here. Once you make a decision, you can't change that decision. So like the created on field, remember, it's a drop-down list, is an option set. Once I saved it, it locked it in place along with all these others. So once you save it, you can't change the record at all. You literally have to delete it and start all over again. And that's what I was going to show you here. So we create a new SLA item, and our KPI can only be selected once. So we have two KPIs, first response by KPI and resolve by KPI. So again, we've already created these. And we have a name. We can specify when it's applicable. We specify the criteria. And then what denotes a failure, what period of time. And it goes from 1 minute all the way up to 3 days. Okay. As a matter of fact, let me, will that work? That's a good question. I think we can. I think we can edit that. So this is an editable field, so it looks like you can change it within reason. Okay, I think this is just the standard time duration field that's available, like on appointments and contacts, or appointments and tasks and stuff like that. So basically, again, this denotes a failure, and then I want to go into a warning state when it hits this time frame, which is 30 minutes. So 10 days to failure, 30 minutes to a warning. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Go back. To the others. Okay, so here's the key. We've got two detail things. So this is the first response by, and if I open this up, you'll see that I have a check on the field called first response sent equals yes. Okay, so that's going to be the success criteria for that. If I go into the resolve by, I'm looking for status is equals to resolved. So that's what denotes those two things. So again, what you're looking for is data that already exists within your record. Okay, so keep that in mind as I kind of go through some of this stuff, because when I get over to cases in just a second, I want you to see what some other things we're talking about. Okay. Did I activate that? Okay, let me put that back on. Also, I noted that when you deactivate a SLA, it seems to remove the is default flag. I think I saw that. Okay, so I want that. I'll set that as default, so that will be applied every time that we create a case. And let's go do that. Okay, so now we have our new case created, and I'm going to jump down to our enhanced SLA details, and you will see that our SLAs have fired off because we specified a default SLA, which was the Premier support. Okay, now as you can see, so here are two SLAs. So it's a subgrid with a basically two timers in there. So that's for first response, and this is for resolve. So again, I need somebody to respond to this person within 60 minutes and resolve it within 24 hours. Okay. Now here's the problem with this. Let me pop that into a window over there. Let me go back to the SLAs here. Here is some things you really have to think about. Actually, go to entitlements first. No, go to SLAs first, sorry. No, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, no, I think I'm in the right place. So basically, this thing is running over here, as you can see. And as soon as I respond back, so basically, if I, let's see, that, research it, like that. Need to respond. Let's create a new phone call. Voicemail. Okay. Let's see, those are still the same. So let's close that and go back to our list. Here is that via phone. The right one. I'm the wrong one, I think. Okay, that one expired, so that must be the older one I had this morning when I was playing. Let's see if it's still working. Yeah, we haven't done the thing where we actually fired off the thing that did the first response. So let's jump over to, while this is clicking away, let's jump over to entitlements for a minute. Hang on a second. Thought I would ask. Okay, so let's go back over to our settings and look at entitlements real quick. Then I'll get to our case that we're working on here. So I also have an entitlement called, Premier Support. So here we have it where it is specific to a datum corporation. Remember that this is record specific because every thing, again, think about entitlement. This should have been called a support contract. I don't know why in the world they didn't call it a support contract. I mean, entitlement is not something I would have ever come up with myself, but that's the way it works sometimes. So anyway, so you pick the record. You pick your date range if you want to restrict things, so we can turn it on or off. So we can set that to yes, it's activated, so I can't change anything as a default. Then I'm working off number of cases, decreased on case resolution. As you can see, I started off with 250. I'm now at 249. Now, a couple of things I've noticed. The entitlement channels do not summarize to tell you if you've put in a number that's larger than your total terms. So I actually added 3 100s here, and it took it without a problem. Now, if I saved it, it wouldn't matter. This is a subgrid. So anyway, so these two things do not seem to be connected. But what will happen is it will decrease. And so if I'd had that turned to yes here on the restrict based on, and I ran out of emails, it would actually fire off a message that said no. Now, here is the problem with the settings that are on the left-hand side for the entitlement. Look on the right-hand side in our case. How many of the things that we say that you can or cannot do are required over here? like 2. Okay. So for instance, I have an entitlement channel. You can have 100 emails, 100 phone calls, or 100 webs. I don't have origin as a required field. So you know how much of the entitlement channel it will look at when deciding if this entitlement should be used or not? None. Notice I don't have an entitlement because this is not Alpine Ski House, or this is Alpine Ski House, not a datum. But the other problem is my is default is turned off. So that means even though I open a case for a datum, it's not automatically going to apply my entitlement. If this is a non-required field, as it is here, and the customer support rep does not enter the entitlement is not applied to the case. Okay. Likewise with product and contact. Remember that we can restrict or enable our entitlements for products and contacts. If we do so, we have got to make sure that our contact field and or our product field are also set as required. Otherwise, the entitlement is not applied toward the case, which totally renders the whole thing useless. Right? So just remember, whatever you're setting the entitlement to check against, you have got to modify all of those fields on the case to match and be required. Otherwise, none of your data is going to line up. And what that'll mean is you're either giving stuff away for free, or you're not keeping track of what the customer's doing, and that could just lead to all kinds of just problems down the road. Okay. Okay. So there we go. So let me go look at cases, and I think I have one for A data. Or do I not? Oh, I don't? Okay. Well, let's go create a new one. I'll tell you what, let me deactivate this real quick. And I will turn it default on so you can see what we're doing. Come on. I'm not bitter, I promise. Okay. Oh, it is locked. Oh, that's right. You know what? Sorry. My bad. Activate that and then set as default. Okay, so a datum origin is going to be, what are we going to, let's do phone. Entitlement, let's not pick one and see what happens. So we're going to save this. Oh, we're going to have case title. Save it. And as you can see, since we had the default is default checked over here, it automatically applied that. And if we look over here, we go do a refresh on this. Everything's still the same because we haven't done what? Close the case. So let's close this as resolved. Okay, go back over here and refresh this. And now, as you can see, we have decremented our phone count and also our remaining count by 1. Okay, so if I create another case, and I resolve this case, and go back over here and refresh this. You'll see that my remaining terms decremented by 1, but my channel did not. So again, if you want to restrict people to a specific support channel, you have to have the origin on the case required, otherwise it won't work correctly. Okay, so let me go back to my service cases. Let me look at some stuff here. So Alpine has a okay, let's go create a new entitlement. To get Peter's question answered. And customer is Alpine. We'll do 1, 12, 31. Yes. Going to give them 100 cases. Save this. And then activate it. And then set this as default. And then I'm going to open up one of Alpine's cases. That one already had one. That was a bad example, sorry. Okay, so that one doesn't have one. So I don't know how to actually add the entitlement other than manually, Peter. So if you create the entitlement after you create the case, you're going to have to apply it manually. Now, what's interesting about this, is another thing I forgot to mention. If I go back to this case here, it already had an entitlement here. There is a thing called do not decrement entitlements. So, for instance, Microsoft has a process whereby if you open a case, they charge you for it. But if it turns out it's a bug, you don't get charged. So that would be a non-deck case is what we call it. And so what would happen is it would actually give the if it had decremented, it would actually go back and add 1 back to the total terms, or sorry, the remaining terms. Okay, but Peter, it does look like if you already have a case created and you create the entitlement secondary, you're going to have to apply those manually. Now the question is, let's go look at this. There's good questions here. So I wonder, can we do an entitlement? No, I don't think so. Okay, it's worth a shot. And I don't think there's a way to apply one. No. I think we can do it with a workflow. We can actually apply an entitlement, but that would be it. Okay. Okay, so what questions do you guys have on either SLAs or entitlements? Where it says where do SLA warnings are shown, they're actually shown on the case itself. That was one, this one. So if you go to your SLA, it'll show it. I think it shows it in the top bar too somewhere, maybe not. but it would show it right there. So it turns yellow when it's a warning, and then red when it's getting close to being expired, and then red for expired. No, it does not change the status reason either. It just changes the SLA. The SLA and status have nothing to do with each other, really. You can fire off the SLA, or you can meet the SLA with a status, but it doesn't change it. Chief Arjan says, what happens if there's not enough total term, but the term of specific channel gets over? Will allow it to create a case on that channel or not? So what happens is it depends. So if you have email like right here, and say we open 100, if we open 100 cases tomorrow, when we go to close that, or when we go to open that next case, it'll actually give me an error saying that we can't do that. That's that message I showed you right there. So the way it works is that error message is shown whenever this value is 0, or depending on the channel, if you monitor that, one of these values. Okay. What's Larry say? Defaults of pretty much nothing gets applied when a new record is created. Otherwise, setting something as a default would change the existing data. Yeah. So the main thing to remember about this is the settings of the entitlement and then your relationship with the case are 100% linked together. So it takes a lot of thought and planning, because you really have got to make sure that you're recording the data, and then that you've got your KPIs and stuff defined as you need. Okay. Let's see. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for joining me today.